And again, that's just the funded debt, right? That $39.2 trillion of debt is the money the U.S. government has borrowed and is obligated to repay. But that doesn't include a lot of other liabilities that are just as real, such as contingent liabilities, where the government has guaranteed student loans or mortgages or pension funds or insurance products. The government stands behind this debt, even though it didn't take on the debt. And so those liabilities are going to be there. Also, unfunded liabilities, where the government has committed to make payments, like Social Security, Medicare, pensions. But these are all liabilities of the government. The government owes this money, but it's not part of the debt. So if you look at the total debt, everything the U.S. government is obligated to pay and that it might realistically be called upon to pay, you're looking at over $150 trillion of debt. So, like 4 or 5 times the official national debt, which is already bad. So, we're completely insolvent as a nation. And obviously there are a lot of problems there, because either we have to default on these commitments or we have to inflate them away, which, from the perspective of the recipient of the government money, getting money of little value is kind of the same as not getting any money at all. So those are major implications, that the people who have been promised money by the U.S. government are not going to get anything, right? They're either going to get nothing or they're going to get something with no value. So, yeah, this is a very serious problem. And I think that's why you saw the big run up in gold as foreign central banks are getting out of dollars and out of treasuries, because they can see what's going to happen. It's just a runaway debt. There is no potential for either party. Maybe the Trump administration was the last chance and we blew that. And so the world recognizes that no political party is going to do anything to prevent this train wreck. And in fact, if you look at a couple weeks ago, former Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, came out and said that the U.S. needs to develop an emergency break the glass plan to deal with the crisis that will ensue when foreign demand for U.S. treasuries is no longer sufficient, when foreigners don't want to buy our treasuries. He said we need to figure out how to deal with that disaster. He did not say that we need to develop a plan to prevent that disaster. We should act now preemptively to put our fiscal house in order to avoid that disaster. No. He pretty much resigned himself to the fact that that's never going to happen, that the disaster is inevitable, and that
The numbers coming out of Washington no longer look like warning signs. They look like the opening stages of a financial detonation. Trillions in debt, promises the government can't realistically keep. And beneath the surface of the economy, Americans were told was strong. A silent crisis is accelerating, one that could erase savings, crush purchasing power, and permanently change the role of the US dollar in the global system. Foreign governments are watching it unfold. Central banks are preparing for it. But most ordinary people still have no idea how deep this problem really goes. Until now. Because in just a moment, Peter Schiff is about to explain why this isn't just another recession warning. It may be the beginning of something far bigger.
What we need to do is figure out how to deal with it, which is very telling in and of itself, because, there's no way to deal with it. We're screwed. That's what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for the audience that may not know, Hank Paulson was the Treasury Secretary under Bush during the great financial crisis, right?
Yes, and he was the architect of a lot of these problems. And now he's warning about the debt that he helped create, because he was around when we did all the bailouts, the TARP program, the bank bailouts, QE1. All that started while he was in government.
Yeah. So what happens? I do want to get to the metals here in a minute. So the trust fund for Social Security is scheduled to run out in, I think, 2032, 2033. no politician is really talking about this.
Well, the other part is that the trust fund is really just an accounting gimmick anyway, because it's not a real trust fund. The only thing in the trust fund are U.S. government bonds. And so the way the trust fund gets money to pay benefits is it takes those bonds and it sells them. Well, the U.S. government could do that without the trust funds. So it's just an illusion. All that happens when the trust fund runs out of government bonds is now the government has to sell the bonds itself. It can't sell the bonds that it's holding in its left pocket. It has to sell new bonds out of its right pocket. But it's the same pair of pants. So it's not a real trust fund. Now, if the trust fund had, German government bonds in it, that would be different. If the trust fund had stock in it, shares of IBM or something that it could go out and sell, that would be different. That would be an actual asset that was being used to meet obligations. But it doesn't. The trust fund has nothing but a government IOU. And the government can only make good on that IOU by going into the market and selling it to somebody, which is what it would do if there was no trust fund. So the trust fund is just there it's really a fraud to create the false impression that there's something funding Social Security when it's nothing more than a giant Ponzi scheme run by the U.S. government.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, they're saying like the payments are going to be reduced by, I think, 20% or something of that nature. And so, for like younger Americans, trying to navigate, should they just forget about Social Security? I imagine the age is they're going to push the age up to like maybe 75 or something to receive it. But.
Yeah, look, most people, young people should just...
What makes this situation so dangerous is that the system itself appears stable right before the pressure breaks. Retirement promises, government obligations, and trillion-dollar deficits continue expanding as if there's no limit. But eventually, reality catches up. And when confidence starts disappearing from government debt, the consequences don't stay on Wall Street. They hit currencies, savings, wages, and the everyday cost of survival. The unsettling part is that many officials no longer talk about preventing the crisis. They're talking about how to survive it. And that shift alone may tell you everything you need to know about what's coming next.
Assume that it doesn't even exist. Because for all practical purposes, it won't. Because if you're in your 20s or your 30s and you get any money out of Social Security, it's not going to buy you very much. You won't be able to retire on it. But even people my age, I'm actually getting close. I'm 63. Obviously, I guess I could start getting some money at some point. But I haven't really I don't factor it into my retirement. But I think that the big problem with Social Security is the burden that it places on the younger people who are still paying the tax. A lot of people pay more in Social Security taxes than they pay in income taxes. And it's very problematic. Also, demographically, it's a very discriminatory tax. It really favors children of the wealthy, because what really happens is Social Security subsidizes their inheritance, because their parents, instead of using up their own assets, you spend Social Security, and they can now will what they didn't have to spend to their children. Well, children who grew up with poorer parents don't get that subsidy. And that's, for African Americans, they disproportionately aren't going to inherit money. So they get harmed. And also life expectancies in African American, it's lower than for white. And a lot of people don't even live long enough to collect their benefits.
Yeah.
If you die, at 64 and you don't get any benefits, you've paid taxes. It's not like, it's an asset that you could leave to your kids. Now, there is a way that I guess a surviving spouse can pick up some benefits. But the people who would gain the most are people who have longevity, Yeah. But that's only for the people who got in a long time ago. The people who are 20s and 30s now, forget about it. I don't care how long they live. They're never going to see value for Social Security. The people who made out on Social Security, a lot of them have already died. They started paying taxes in the 30s or 40s or 50s, and they paid very little. And they ended up with a windfall, which is how all Ponzi schemes work. If you get in early, you make a lot of money. But that's all based on the losses suffered by the people who get in late. And the generations that follow my generation, the generations that follow the baby boom, they're the bag holders when it comes to Social Security.
Yeah. I've definitely been pondering that, and making decisions in my life that could help me navigate those challenges. So
there's been situations I've read stories about where people get like a terminal diagnosis from a doctor. Right? Let's say you're 40, 50 years old, and the doctor says, you got 5 years to live. You still can't get out of Social Security. You have to keep paying it. Right?
Wow.
You can't get it. You can't get out of it, even though you're never going to be able to collect it.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like you still have to make the payments.
Wow. That's a big scam. So how critical is it for average people to own gold? I mean, it seems like gold is I wouldn't say the only alternative, but when you think about the amount of debt, the amount of inflation, Social Security is not going to be around and such. Preserving your purchasing power is a critical, thing.
I think it's important. Maybe you could say critical that everybody owns some gold. And most people have some gold. They have it in jewelry. Now, in order to access it, they would have to melt it down or sell it to somebody who would melt it down. But most people should have monetary gold too. They shouldn't just rely on pawning their jewelry when times get tough, because jewelry could have a lot of sentimental value and other value that far exceeds the melt value of the gold. So it's better to go out and buy gold, buy silver, and have it, so that you're not forced, hawking your family heirlooms in order to pay the bills. I'm helping people at Schiff Gold take physical possession of gold and silver. And in fact, I have a new program there called T-Gold, where you can buy the gold and the silver, and we don't take delivery. We'll have it stored for you, and you can buy it in very small increments. You can buy, little bits at a time, and take delivery later if that's what you want. And I'm actually going to develop that platform ultimately for e-commerce, for people to